Hello and welcome. This is Alex here. In lesson 1, let's take a look at the timer system. This is a system designed to make some sort of replacement to the coroutine system, not obviously in a 100% way, because this is not exactly the same. This timer system is kind of similar to the one that Unreal got within their engine. So the idea is to launch a timer with some sort of time, of course, and a callback to do something at the end of that thing. You can obviously pass parameters if you want, and pretty much that's it, the function of the timer. I mean, the class timer, I'm not gonna enter into too much detail because it's fairly simple. You can pause the timer, which is kind of a really cool thing, because usually people, in order to pause the game, they use the time scale of Unity. In my case, I never use the time scale. I leave the time scale alone, and I pause the game with the classic flag of game pause. Doing that flag, I can pause those timers, so the timer will be obviously stopped until the game is restored for whatever reason. You can decide if the timer can be paused or it cannot. And also you can have timers with ID in order to decide to stop the timer, because let's say that you set a timer of 10 seconds to do whatever thing. At 5 seconds, the user decides to leave the game. You need to stop that timer, otherwise the timer will continue and will be launched, which will cause some sort of non-wanted bug. So you can get that ID of the timer in order to be able to pause or stop the timer. The timer setter himself is just a pool of timers. Instead of creating a timer every time that you need one, you create a pool with all the timers that you expect to use during the game, and that's it. You get a new timer from the pool, you ask to the system start a timer, the timer will give us a timer which is just making a loop through the list and finding one that it's not active at the moment, then setting the context, the callback, and the values, the timer, if it can be paused or not, an ID if there's an ID, and pretty much that's it, because the update, it's just about updating the timers. In this particular instance, I'm using a kind of a small trick, which is process two timers at once, which means that I need to be able to make this list a multiple of 2, otherwise the code will crash. But besides that, this is kind of a neat trick in order to process two timers at once and reduce, let's say, the processing queue of this kind of systems, because at the end it's just a list, so the complexity is n whatever list or size of the list will be. But like I said, the timer itself is pretty simple. Our core singleton obviously will integrate those systems. I have two different timers, one for the game, which is my timer, and the timer core for all the core related things. For example, when I load audio, which is part of my core system, I use the timers for the core. When I load anything which is related to the core itself, I use my core, and the timer is only for the game. We can have a number of timers pool, so within the inspector you have this total timers pool. I have 160, something like that. Well, the point is that you can have whatever amount, or whatever amount that you expect to use, that's it, because at the end it's just a pool. And pretty much that's it about the core and the timer itself. You declare the timer, and when I'm initiating the core system, I create the new core. I call the garbage collector to keep this thing alive. I don't want this thing to be garbage collected ever. Then I init the timer system whatever amount I have, and the same for the other timer. So I have the timer core and the timer for the game. I add them to my systems, to the updated table, and pretty much this is now the important thing, the forward API. Let's take a look at this. And basically, like I said, our core will be the facade to call anything. So you will never ever get access directly to the timer system or the audio system or translation system. Everything will be forwarded to this class. So within that thing, we have all the methods that we want. Stop all timers, stop timer with ID, get unused timer. You see, from your game, you will be calling this like e.g. core instance, well, instance start timer, blah 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 blah. So that way you will never ever know that there's that kind of timer class or whatever thing I want within my core. The idea is for users to be able to use this thing without caring about what's happening behind the scenes. Or at least for me, this is a much better way to find any kind of bug because everything has to pass through this function. So I can decide what I want to expose or what I don't want to expose. Let's pretend that this unused timer, it's a function that I don't want that to be exposed ever. I just need to delete this method and that's it. You will never know that there's a function to get an unused timer. So I am in control and deciding what I want to expose because my class, like I said, could have a lot of methods or even though variables that I might want or might not want the user to access. So this is, like I said, pretty much the idea of the timers. Now let's take a look at how to use these timers. Let's take a look at the differences and the things. I have this testing class and let's explore the usual case for the coroutines. You will have something like start coroutine, blah 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 blah, and your coroutine will be, for example, this kind of fire. Let's pretend that we are doing some sort of shooting game, so we fire a weapon, so we call our weapon shoot, we disable the weapon after shooting to avoid shooting again. Then we have the animation and we will play the shoot animation because the animation will be attached to this thing, whatever thing. The point is that this function will return us the time of the animation. Then we will wait for those seconds or whatever time it is, and we will re-enable the weapon. This is kind of the standard coroutine thing that everyone uses. And what I propose is to use something just different, fire with timer. And what does the fire with timer do? Let's just get the code up here so we can compare one to the other. When you use a coroutine, you are effectively pausing the game because, well, the function is being paused during this thing, and this thing will never be called, this function will never be called until that return finish whatever thing they have to do. The idea using timers is just to, I call the shoot, I do the shoot animation just the same, I get the time, and then I start a timer. With that time, I pass the context, which is this class. I then cache the action using the name of the class, and I call the method that I want to call after such time. So what that means is that this function will not be stopped. I will execute everything which is within that function, and then I will call after the timer whatever thing I wanted, which is the re-enable of the weapon. So instead of having one coroutine, I have two functions that does everything that I want. Of course, you can put everything within and use a lambda or whatever thing you want to do, but I like very much to prefer to have two separate functions because it's easy to take a look at how this code works or where the codes takes me or whatever other thing. So it's much better or much clean and readable for me to have an external function, but whatever you prefer. So this is the idea of the timers. Instead of having coroutines for everything, just replace those coroutines and start using timers. Do the same thing. Remember that you are not pausing anything, so you cannot have any kind of code over here. This enable. If we do this thing, the code will be called immediately because there's no stop. This is just a normal C# function. Everything will be called, so you have to establish your breakpoints. My breakpoint is this call to the timer, and after that I don't want to execute anything else. Of course, you might have some other things that you want to execute within this call, but this is up to you. The idea is, like I said, split your functions into several functions in order to be able to do everything that you want into that function and stop the thing. And like I said earlier, we can have IDs for this timer. So I can have this uint timer ID, and I just need to call the ID function, and that's it. Now I have a timer that I will be able to stop. Let's say that in this on destroy, I will be able to stop the timer with ID. Well, I have to move that thing over there. and now I can just stop that timer. That's it, just as simple as that. There's nothing else. Let's remove this thing. There's nothing else to do to use this system. Very simple and very effective, which is what we are looking for in this kind of place. And one of the cool things about the system is that you can take this code and port it to Godot or any other engine that uses C#, because as you are seeing, we are not using any kind of Unity thing at all. We have our own timers, which will delay the execution, will call something else after that time. So there's nothing that we have to worry about, because that's it. And if we want parameter, let's say that we have some sort of int weapon ID, for example. That's it. Our timer with parameters. That's it. Super, super simple and neat. There's nothing else and nothing more to talk about in this lesson. So I will see you in lesson 2. Until then, see ya.